Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities and Miniatures, and it is time for that Friday dose of really obscure obscurities in literature. I present to you today My Gorilla Family and other stories of human horror. I sound so happy about that, yes. This is by Iijima, part of Living the Lion's Smudge imprint, which has just been putting out all kinds of really weirdly, disturbingly wonderful books. I mean, they have really put out some, if you're into this kind of stuff, some really interesting releases. But I can say that about everything that Living the Lion has put out is nothing but interesting releases. And if you like these types of books that Living the Lion puts out, I wholeheartedly recommend and encourage you, while there's time at least, as of this filming, to check out their Consigned Kickstarter, which is being a anthology to get the company back on track with the legal craziness that the dissolution of Diamond and all of that entailed with comic distribution. So I'll save you all the details from that. Let's just talk about fun, interesting comics immediately. And I had this sneaking suspicion when I started really looking at this stuff, and it's really interesting because other than the giant phallic tail of the random monster that our friend is dragging through town, in the back here they have a thing about the artist and some of his interesting stories. And what I found interesting was that it was through Mandarake that a lot of this stuff was collected and put together with the help of, not to say that there aren't a bunch of other people involved here, but to me, this is the kind of stuff you got to dig. This is like all from a bunch of obscure, more adult-oriented manga magazines in the very late 60s, early 70s. And if you're familiar with what was going on in Japan, especially in the 70s, and the whole student movement, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in the country as those eras started to progress. And I feel like this is kind of a piece of that. Now, this is a little earlier, but I know that having started to try to do some research on Iijima's stuff myself, and even the authors mention in here that his later work, his like post 71, 72, something around like 74, 75, he started to get a more refined style. And I gotta say, his style as it is pretty crude, but there is an appeal to that kind of thing. And if you like a lot of that kind of outsider art that's a little rough around the edges, and it's not your typical style, I think you're going to have a lot of things to enjoy here. First of all, the stories themselves are very much in the... these are just the various titles that they put out. See, I thought the UFO Mushroom Invasion was the first one, but I guess Her Frankenstein was. Anyway, various books that they put out at this point under the Smudge imprint. There is all sorts of random nudity in these books. I don't think it's the most titillating or eroticized stuff based on just the roughness of the art, but there's some interesting stuff going on, and I'm going to try to keep as much of it off camera as possible, because I tried doing this before and immediately the AI whatever the algorithm junk that YouTube uses flagged it for inappropriate stuff. So yeah, this is not my first rodeo at trying to get this book filmed, and if others have done it, I haven't bothered to check, and I don't really care because this is my take on it. But you can see there are a fair amount of stories, and it is a fairly short book at barely 200 pages, and when you consider most manga stories tend to be rather quick, that's a good chunk. So as I said, the art is definitely a product of its era, but it's definitely a thing. And again, I'm trying to self-censor as much as I can, but one of the nice things about a lot of these stories is they tend to have all kinds of lovely, gruesome ends. And most stories tend to be fairly quick too. The men landing on the women planet. I'm not going to spoil that one. I'm still trying to figure out the catch to this story and what the whole thing is. There's like random aliens arriving and then disemboweling people just because in the span of one panel. Yeah. And then there's the title story, My Gorilla Family, and this woman wakes up and gorillas are now active members of society, and I will admit a lot of red flags started to pop up. I'm like, whoa, where are we trying to go with this? And what's interesting is at various points through this story, and again, this is before we have a lot of foreigners really spending serious time in Japan, they make it a point, and I don't know if that's the modern authors trying to make sure that we're being a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Thoughtful, maybe? But, yeah, the whole story goes through with them getting married. And they do make it a point that, the gorillas are better in every way than Asians, than whites, than blacks, than everybody, which was an interesting choice. Yep. They were also better mannered and more ethical than humans. You went out of context panels, I'm like, there's a perfect one. And ultimately, the story doesn't really even go anywhere. It just, it's in the book, and that's that. And there's Satan here that looks like a early version of the main character from Big Mouth. I can't think of the name of the monster now. And I watched it too. But again, I gotta give the guy credit for just trying different things. Stories get weird. A frosty broad. And just so happens, oh, this is the story with the killer clams that skin people alive. We have the incredible shrinking man with a interesting turn at the end. You gotta have the twist, right? Yeah, I gotta say, all the characters remind me of, Duke Togo with those big, thick sideburns. This is an interesting one about the tree in the town that keeps giving birth to, plant people. No context will be given to you here. I'm just going to show you random panels and I'll let you figure that out yourself. Yeah, homosexualis. This is not what I thought it was going to be. At all. It's even weirder. Erotic horror finale. Porno theater. Okay. I will admit this story does veer into that territory, but you know what? As someone who grew up with heavy metal, there was always a good dose of eroticism with graphic violence and destruction and cool-looking mechanical monstrosities. So, you know what? It feels totally in place in a book like this. And, again, if you're a fan of this type of stuff, and I mean, I've always been a fan. If you've looked at a lot of the content on this channel, I like old comics. It's cool seeing where things started. I mean, Junji Ito, this ain't by any stretch of the imagination. And I remember one time, a couple of years back, we were in Japan, and my daughter was looking for school books, and my son was picking out a book for his birthday. And, of course, I was in, the section. Some bookstores in Japan will have, a old manga, vintage manga section. Not all, though. Only some. And I remember I was browsing, and there was an older guy, about younger than my dad, but definitely older than me, and he was just kind of taken aback. He's like, as a foreigner, even, why are you over here? And I'm just like, I started rattling off what I was looking for, and the guy was like, why would you even know these things? And I'm like, I like old comics. And he was just like, that's really impressive. He was very impressed by that, and we talked about comics for a while, and eventually my kids got sick of having me sit there talking to random old strangers and drag me out of the store, but I'm like, that was a nice interaction. And honestly, that's the thing I love about old comics. There's an appeal, and this is such a niche little one, and the fact that we've got companies willing to take a chance and throw this stuff out there translated, I'm fully in support of, and hopefully you guys are as well. I know at the moment getting a hold of these is going to be difficult, but hopefully if you're stumbling across this video in the far future, it won't be, and we'll be in a better place. But in the meantime, at least, like I said, check out Living the Lions Consigned, because it's going to have maybe not as much vintage stuff as this, but definitely stuff that is just as out there. And with that said then, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.